When it comes to missing people, it's generally accepted that the more clues police can find, the better. However, sometimes those clues only make the case even more confusing and leave investigators scratching their heads. These are 5 disappearances with strange clues. Number 5. Rico Harris was traveling from Alhambra to Seattle when he disappeared in October of 2014. He lived in Seattle with his girlfriend, Jennifer, but had traveled to visit his mother in Alhambra on October 8th without telling her. His mother was also surprised by the sudden trip and worried he had been drinking. He stayed in Alhambra for 24 hours, but didn't sleep the entire time and left to drive back to Seattle just after midnight on October 10th. He called Jennifer multiple times while on the road, and at 8 a.m., he told her he was near Sacramento. Jennifer later tried to contact him again, but got no answer. At 10:44 a.m., he left her a text message apologizing for the missed call and saying he was heading into the mountains. He turned his phone off at 11:15 a.m. On October 12th, a sheriff's deputy found Rico's car in an isolated area in the Yolo County Regional Park. At first, he thought nothing of it, but the following day it was still there. The car appeared to have been ransacked, and the police officer ran the plates to discover who it belonged to. Rico's mother was informed about the car, and he was reported missing. 2 motorists reported seeing Rico on Highway 16, and authorities found a backpack of his belongings around the same area. His phone was in the backpack and had videos Rico had taken on October 10th. One video, apparently recorded accidentally, showed Rico ripping things up and tossing CDs around the car, explaining the state of the vehicle when it was found. However, Rico wasn't found despite numerous searches of the park. On October 19th, more than a week after he went missing, another witness claimed to have seen Rico near the parking site where his car had been found. The car had been towed at this point. Fresh footprints, believed to belong to Rico due to his size, were found nearby. Searches continued, and at one point a cadaver dog seemed very interested in a pool of water, though divers found nothing there. There are numerous theories as to what happened to Rico. Some believe he simply got lost in the woods, but that means he would have survived for at least a week in the wilderness with no camping equipment and no experience. Others suggest Rico had been on drugs at the time. He had become reliant on drugs and alcohol after an incident brought his basketball career to an early end. He'd been sober for several years by the time he disappeared, though admitted he had relapsed in June of 2014. Some have suggested Rico staged his disappearance, pointing to the video of him tearing up paper in his car, believing they could have been documents for his old life. Number 4. Leia Roberts initially disappeared on March 9, 2000, but it wasn't until her Jeep was found crashed at the bottom of a ravine just over a week later that her family worried. Leia had a difficult few years. In 1995, her mother suddenly died from heart disease, causing Leia to postpone her final years at high school. In 1998, she almost died in a car accident. Her lung was punctured and her leg completely shattered. Luckily, she overcame the injuries and had a new positive outlook on life after a near-death experience. Leia focused on self-improvement, learning new skills, writing poetry, and journaling about life and adopting a kitten. On March 9th, Leia agreed to babysit with her housemate the following day. The housemate, Nicole, went out, and when she came back, she found Leia, her cat, and her Jeep missing. When Leia didn't show up for their babysitting job the following day, Nicole grew concerned and contacted Leia's sister, Kara. On March 14th, Leia was reported missing. Kara and Nicole went into her room to find she had apparently taken clothes with her, along with the pet carrier and supplies. She left behind a note reading, "I'm not suicidal, I'm the opposite," with a drawing of the Cheshire Cat's grin beneath it. Along with the notes was about a month's rent. All this convinced Kara and Nicole that Leia was planning to come back. On March 18th, Kara was contacted by police, who found Leia's vehicle in a ravine. It appeared to have rolled several times, and the majority of Leia's belongings were inside. The only thing that appeared to be missing was Leia and her cat. Despite the damage to the car, there was no evidence Leia had actually been injured in it. There was no blood, no sign of the seatbelt having been stretched by the force of the accident either. Leia's family helped search the nearby towns where it's known she had been shortly before the accident. They eventually found a restaurant she had visited, and one of the patrons who had seen her claims she left with a mysterious man named Barry. Barry was never found, and the case went cold. In 2006, new detectives working on the case discovered Leia's Jeep hadn't been properly processed. Upon doing so, they found the starter relay had been cut, meaning someone had tampered with her vehicle. Male DNA was also found on Leia's clothes. Despite the progress, investigators have once again come to a dead end. Number 3. Leon Monser's life was far from perfect when he disappeared in February of 1982. He was in the process of getting divorced, drank heavily, and was having an extramarital affair. He also beat his wife and his girlfriend. He was very overprotective, even controlling of his wife. He didn't want her or their 3-year-old daughter to leave the house without him and didn't want their pictures taken. Why exactly this is has never been explained. Leon wasn't a particularly high-profile person, so it wasn't as if paparazzi were looking for photos of his child. He was working 3 jobs at the time of his disappearance, suggesting he was worried about money. A deal with a loan shark may have been the cause for his worry, or it may have been something else entirely. Shortly before Leon went missing, a note had been shoved through his door. Written using cutout letters from a magazine, the note read, "Leave it alone or you're dead." Leon apparently threw the note away. Whether he heeded the warning is unknown. Leon was last seen leaving his home in Bel Air, Ohio on February 18th. He left behind his cigarettes, which is uncharacteristic for him. It wasn't until 2 days later that there was any sign of him. His wife found his car idling in a ditch. The keys were still in the ignition, and the driver's side door was open and the dome light was on. The car was mud splattered, and some of the mud had gotten into the interior of the car, indicating there'd been a struggle. There have been numerous sightings of Leon after his disappearance, although these were all unconfirmed. A mysterious man followed Leon's wife and daughter for 2 years after his disappearance. Leon's wife believed this may have been her husband. It's possible he faked the disappearance to get someone off of his back. However, it's also possible whoever sent the note caught up with Leon. His wife received several anonymous calls after his disappearance. One claiming to know Leon had been dismembered and his body parts were disposed of in a river. The investigation went cold and Leon was declared legally dead in 1988. Number 2. On October 24, 1961, a 4-year-old girl told her neighbor her mother was gone and the kitchen was covered in red paint. The neighbor, Barbara Barker, went across the street to discover Joanne Rich's kitchen covered in blood, with the phone pulled from the wall and beer cans strewn about. Joanne hasn't been seen since. The morning of October 24th was completely ordinary. Her husband left early for a business trip, and Joanne spent the morning doing errands with her daughter while a neighbor watched her 2-year-old son. At around midday, Barbara visited with her 4-year-old son, and the pair played outside while their mothers chatted. Barbara eventually went home but left her son to play at Joanne's. Joanne worked in the garden for a few hours before, just after 2 p.m. Then she hurriedly took the 2 4-year-olds back to Barbara's and left them outside. She told them she would be back soon and returned to her home without letting Barbara know the children were there. Around 15 minutes later, Barbara happened to look out the window to see Joanne wearing a trench coat and holding something red in her hands, rushing around. Assuming she was just playing with the children, she thought nothing of it. At around 4 p.m., Barbara went to collect her son, only to find the children on her side of the street. She took Joanne's daughter back to Joanne's house and left her to head inside herself as she got ready to leave. It was moments later that the girl discovered something was very wrong. Barbara called the police after making the discovery. The blood matched Joanne's blood type, though it's not clear if it actually belonged to her. A bloody palm print was found on the wall though. Again, it's unclear if this belonged to Joanne. The blood led out of the house and to her driveway where her car was missing. Neighbors reported there was an unfamiliar car in Joanne's driveway at around 3 p.m., though police dismissed this as being an unmarked police car that arrived after Barbara's call. However, neighbors insisted it had been there earlier. Theories turned from an attack to a staged disappearance when it was discovered Joanne had checked out numerous true crime and thriller books over the summer. One had a plot in which a woman disappeared from her own home, leaving behind a scene that was very similar to the one Joanne left. This had led many to believe Joanne staged her own disappearance as she was unhappy with her lifestyle as a housewife. Others believe she may have suffered a miscarriage or an abortion gone wrong and died on her way to the hospital. Number 1. Diane Augget has been missing since April of 1998, disappearing after leaving her home in Odessa, Florida. Diane was 40 years old and suffering with mental health problems around the time of her disappearance, though it's not clear whether they had an impact on the events of April 10, 1998. She'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in the 1980s, and after a difficult few years, things seemed to have calmed down after she moved in with her sister. On the morning of April 11th, Diane left the house to run an errand. She'd been in good spirits, according to her family, and there was nothing to suggest there was anything wrong. Nobody from her family saw her again. There were numerous reports of Diane in the days after her disappearance. A bartender at a bar about a half-hour away from Diane's home reported a woman matching her description had come in on the day of her disappearance. He'd served her until she started to act drunk and walked in circles. A motorist claimed to have seen Diane walking north along the nearby US Route 19 later that same day. 3 days later, a waitress at the inn on the Gulf Hotel spotted her eating lunch. This was the last sighting of Diane, but police would receive more clues in the coming weeks, months, and years. At first, this could probably be brushed up as Diane's mental health taking another turn for the worse, but it doesn't seem she was the only person involved in her disappearance. On April 13th, the day before the lunch sighting, Diane's mother received a phone call from her daughter. Unfortunately, she was out at the time, but the answering machine recorded the message. Diane called for help and for someone to let her out. All the time, it sounded as if someone was trying to get the phone. Someone then said, "Hey, give me that." Those sources differ as to whether this was Diane speaking or a gruff voice. The call was then terminated. On April 15th, the day after the last sighting of Diane, the tip of Diane's right middle finger was found at the side of US Route 19, near New York Avenue. 2 weeks later, a plastic bag containing Diane's neatly folded clothes was found in an outdoor freezer of a convenience store less than a mile from her home. Given the rest of the evidence, this suggested Diane had been steadily heading north and traveled for more than 22 miles in that direction, but the clothes seem even more peculiar. This was the last new discovery for around 2 years, and the case went cold. In 2000, a local newspaper ran a story on the disappearance. The following day, Diane's brother's girlfriend found a Ziploc bag in the freezer of another local convenience store with the word Diane scrawled across it. Inside were items of makeup and toiletries Diane's family believed belonged to her. So far, this case has no answers, and now 2 decades has passed since the last piece of evidence. It's likely to remain a mystery. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.